You know what? It's the top of the hour, so why don't we get this show started and kick off the meetup for this month, or this bi-weekly session, I guess. So welcome everyone to the June 9th edition of the Vancouver Power BI and Modern Excel User Group Meetup. Today we are going to be doing some Power Query, and this is going to be awesome. I'm super looking forward to this. Before we turn it over to Melissa, though, I'm going to go through and do the standard thanking of the sponsors and all that kind of good jazz. So we are into the welcome and overview portion right now. In about 5 minutes, we'll be into the main presentation. So first off, a big thanks to our sponsors, Skillwave.training, which is my training company where we help you learn about Excel and Power BI and do some amazing things. Excel Guru is a parent company that is part owner of Skillwave, and the Monkey Tools add-in, which is the software that I write to help you do some performance testing and understand your Excel and Power BI models and build models faster and better than what you can manually. Our next meetups that we have coming up, I'm super excited to be welcoming Leila Itati to the program in a couple of weeks. She's going to be talking about custom visuals without code using Charticulator. So this is going to be great. Leila is a big AI person in the Power BI space, if you don't know her. So I'm super excited to be having her showing up and being part of this as well. And then we've got Sam Bide that is going to be coming and talking about a universal data consolidator tool that he has, and that is going to be in the Excel track in about a month right now. Be aware that Sam is joining us from India. That is about 12 hours different from where I am. So rather than running at our normal time in the evenings, this is going to be a very early start on the 9 a.m. on the West Coast. So just be aware of that. But Leila's will be our normal 6 p.m. Startup slot. Just a quick note here. I can't remember if I mentioned this at the last meetup, but we have finally given Monkey Tools the website that it deserves. It has a dedicated website now at Monkey Tools where we are collecting our support articles and a knowledge base there, and are actually showing what all the features are around this tool set. So if you haven't checked this out and you're working with Power Query and Power Pivot in Excel, you definitely should head on over to monkeytools.ca. Take a look at the tool. You can even download the free version right from the site there. No credit card information required, all that kind of jazz. And then there's pro trials and all that kind of stuff available as well. Just a quick note that the registration discount for the live self-service BI bootcamp 3-day extravaganza in Mississauga, Ontario, which is coming up in August. This discount ends this week on June 17th, which well, I guess is just over a week. So if you're interested in coming and being part of this training, we're going to have 3 days of intensive hands-on stuff, as well as a 1-year access to the online video program of this one as well, with ongoing AMA sessions and whatnot. If you've been looking to try and get back into the classroom for some in-person time with Excel and Power BI, this could be the time to do it. So don't forget to check out that link, because I say the discount is, I mean, we'll still be accepting registrations, but the discount is going to be disappearing as of June 17th. Quick reminder, the home for all of the recordings for these meetups is hosted on our Skillwave YouTube channel. The short link is listed here. I will post this into the chat afterwards. You should definitely subscribe to make sure that you can actually see them, even if you don't manage to make it to the meetup live based on time constraints. Also, our Monkey Shorts videos. Today's episode was released. I'm showing how do you enter data into multiple cells at once in Excel. This is one of those tricks that you want to be an Excel ninja, you must know this. So just keep that in mind, but it's a short 3-minute targeted piece. We've also had a couple of other ones with dynamic expanding collapsing messages and using Excel while the Power Query editor is actually open. So those are just the last 3 videos that we actually have on the Monkey Shorts channel. 3 minutes of technical content or less, and we release a new one on a weekly basis. The playlist link is down the bottom. The last thing that I'm going to say before I actually exit stage left here is, if you are interested in coming on stage and speaking at VanPUG, we would love to have you. We are currently looking for speakers for our July and onwards place here. So if you've got cool stuff that you'd like to show off, if it's related to Excel and or Power BI, we'd love to have you be part of this. We're always taking new speakers. As a matter of fact, I think Melissa's relatively new to the speaking game here as well. So we're super happy to have her joining us here. But if you'd like to be the next Melissa, you can actually fill out this survey and tell us what you want to talk about. We'll get in touch and we'll get you on our stage. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen because it is time to welcome Melissa Korte to our program. Melissa is going to be talking about some Power Query stuff And Melissa, we've agreed that as far as questions go, what we'll try and do is I'll moderate those questions along the way. So if they come into the chat, probably I think what we said is it makes the most sense is you've got 3 different solutions you're going to work with. So maybe we can break in with questions between each one or save more to the end as well if it looks like we're going that direction. That sound about right?
That sounds about right, yes.
Awesome, perfect. The floor is yours, my friend. Let's talk Power.
Thank you so much, yeah. So, well, Power Query, let's briefly talk about me for a sec. So I work for a company called Adamos in the Netherlands. I've been with them for over 15 years now. In my current role, I work on projects that focus on digitization, optimization, automation, and of course some analysis. And I also provide some in-house training. At the end of 2019, I became an enterprise DNA expert. That title can be awarded to members for their contributions to the community, in my case, by providing support on their forum. That's something that I really enjoy doing in my spare time, and it's also been instrumental in getting more exposure to a wider range of business scenarios. It also helps in learning and discovering more about these tools, as well as help solidify skills. Because, as I said, data analysis is only a part of my job. Of course, it also led me to some surprising opportunities. For one, I'm here today, and I also had the chance to create 2 courses on Power Query for Enterprise DNA, which can both be accessed through their learning platform. The first covers fundamentals, and the second is very dear to me because that focuses on practical application and problem solving, which we'll be doing in a short while. So I think that sums up most of my passions: learning, sharing, and solving practical problems with Power Query. That's more than enough about me. Let's get to the fun stuff. So this is what we'll be covering today. This is our scenario. We'll be transforming pivoted data into a tabular format. It's a very common requirement, and the sample was provided by Access Analytic. If you're not familiar, please check them out. There's a link that you can see at the bottom of this page. Win Hopkins runs most of these challenges. Personally, I'm a huge fan of those because of 2 main reasons. It's a great way to get some dedicated practice in, and it's also very insightful to dissect submissions from others. So that's enough about this. Let's get to Excel. Right, so here we are in the Power Query editor. And we'll be doing 3 solutions. So the first will be focused mainly on using the UI. Let's start with that one. So I'll reference my sample query. Just create a reference to that. And we'll be transforming this to that tabular format. So what kind of stands out when you look at this data is that these columns here are all the same thing. To me, that shouts out, transpose me. So that's what I'll do. I'll go to the Transform tab and select Transpose. Now we can elevate that first row to the headers. So use first row as headers. There it is. And now we get all of our data spread across many columns, right? So we want to unpivot this to bring that data together. So there's always a column selected, I'm afraid, but we'll choose unpivot columns, unpivot other columns. And the thing to note here is that in this second argument, it lists the columns that you're pivoting on. Now I wanted to unpivot all my columns and I had a column selected. So if I remove that column reference from that second list and press that check mark, then I've unpivoted all my columns. So the result is that all of our data is now in one single column, and we need to split out those values. But we also need to keep the value pairs together, so these dates and the associated numbers. So to do that, we need a unified label, right? So the attribute, it doesn't have a consistent label for each of these value pairs. So we can create that by adding a custom column. So I'll choose add column, conditional column. There it is. And now we can create some logic to generate a label for both the value pairs. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but you always have to be aware of the data that you're dealing with. So in this specific case, I'll look for the word employees without the capital E. So I'll choose the attribute column, then select contains, and write employ. Let's see, that should be right. Yep. And if we're at that row, then it should be the number of employees. Otherwise, we're dealing with the date column. So press OK. And this added this column for me. Of course, I can now delete that attribute column. I no longer need it, so I'll remove that. And on to the task of keeping these values together. Now, for that type of job, usually an index is required. So via that mini table icon, I'll go to add index, and I'll add one from 0. Of course, I need to update that index because now it has a unique value for all of my rows. So on the transform tab, I'll select standard, integer divide, and divide that by 2. So now each of the value pairs share the same key. I can select my custom column to unpivot this data. So I'll select, or pivot I should say, I select pivot column. It suggests the value as the value column, so that's correct. And under advanced, I have to choose don't aggregate because my data, I have several types of data in this column, but you can also see by the left cell alignment that these are all text strings. So those can't be aggregated. Press OK. Perfect. Of course, I no longer need that index. I can remove that as well. And all I have to do now is clean up some of this data. So I can remove the blanks, set appropriate data types. So this is a date and time value, and this is a whole number. And finally, just extract the date. So on the transform tab, date and date only. Perfect. So I don't think there will be any questions on this, but please let me know, Ken.
You do have one, actually. Yep. Henry has asked, why just employ? Could you have used anything else like employee when you were creating your logic?
Yeah, it's you always have to look at your data. If that word employee was written in lowercase, starting the E with a lowercase, that would cause issues. So that's why I chose to omit that E.
I just like to say I think that's clever because my sort of solution to that one would either be to force it to lowercase or uppercase, which would actually add another step. So so grabbing that center section of it is kind of interesting, and I've always said with these things, you always want to have enough that it's not going to cause a false positive, but not too much that it's going to lose something that's important, right? So, yeah, nice. I like that trick.
Awesome. Great. So this is for the most part, this was a UI-driven solution. We only had to make a slight modification to the code when we omitted a column name from a list. Of course, we also added that custom column, but we used the UI to generate that as well. So for the next solution, it will be a hybrid one. Let's explore that. So again, I'll create a reference to my sample query. And this time I'll start by adding that index from 0. So via that mini table icon again in the top left corner, I'll choose add an index column from 0. Of course, again, I have to update that. So on the transform tab, I'll select standard integer divide, enter 2. All right. So now I can use this grouping to group by that index and to get all of the matching rows associated with it. There are 3 places where you can access group by. So on the transform tab, it's in the front end of your ribbon. On the home tab, it's in the transform section, or you can right click that header and you'll find group by here as well. So I'll press that. And the operation that I want to perform is get all of the rows. So I will also rename this all rows. Perfect. So when I now click off to the side, we can see a preview of that nested table down below, right? And if I wanted to use the user interface to transform this table, I could click on that, but that will drill into that specific value. So that's no option. What I'll do instead is I'll right click in that white space here and add it as a new query. So I've zoomed into one specific sample of my data, and I can transform this again using the user interface. So let's do that. I won't need the description column, so I'm going to remove that. Won't need the index anymore either, so I'll remove that as well. And now I can flip this data on its sides, getting all of the dates in one column and all of the values in the column beside it. So on the transform tab, I can use transpose, remove the blank rows. Perfect. So all I have to do now is transfer the logic that we created using the UI to the other query that I was working on previously. For that, I'll open the advanced editor window. And the first thing I did was remove columns. So that's this step. I'm just going to copy everything, press Ctrl+C to copy that, and I'm done. Step back to my other query, and I'll add a custom column. I can reference my all rows that contains that nested table value. So I'll just reference that. I'm not going to do anything in here. I find it horribly difficult to format code here. So I'll just press OK, and I'll go to the advanced editor window again. Just open that up. Let's zoom in a bit. Perfect. I'm just going to make some space, and in the query you see a let and an in clause, and in between there's a commented limited list of variable names and values assigned to them. Now we're going to create a nested let statement. So I have to start with the let clause, paste in my code, indent that a bit. Perfect. And all I have to do is replace that initial table reference, because we want to transform all of our nested table here in the all rows column. For that, all I have to do is get this bit of code that we already brought in. I'll cut that and I'll paste that here in the beginning. Perfect. So press down. Let's see if that worked. So I'll click off to the side in the white space again to see that preview down below. And that's looking really good. So I just need to keep our custom column. I don't need the rest anymore, so I'll right-click that header. And I'll remove all my other columns. I can use the expand column option to extract the values from that table and do some final cleanup. So set appropriate data types. This is a daytime and a whole number. And on the transform tab, select date only. So this is solution number 2. It's a hybrid solution leveraging a helper query to design some code. Let me know what you think.
I think the overall sentiment on this is that that was awesome and you're awesome. So good job.
All right.
Very, very cool. One question from Ron, why not simply select the data type on the column heading?
Yeah, it sometimes falls over because it has that time component. So we usually just assign it the correct data type and then extract the date.
Fair enough. I think that's the only question at this point.
Let's see. So one more solution to go. What will she do next? All right, here we go. I'll reference my my sample again. And this time I'm going to add a custom column to this table. So I'll add a custom column. And all I'm going to do is enter an underscore to access or to get a record for the current row of the table. Press OK. So this returns a record. And when I click off to the side in the white space, I can see that has all of the values of that row inside the table, and for this as well. So I'm not interested in keeping the entire record. I can remove the description because I won't need that. So inside the formula bar, I can add a record function. So record remove fields. And here I can just refer to that description. So refer to the column by name or the field by name. And press that check mark at the start. Made an error there. Forgot the closing bracket. There we go. Let's see if that worked. Yeah, that field value is now gone. I don't need the field names. All I'm interested in retaining at this time is the field values. So I'll add another function here inside the formula bar. I'll choose record to list. There it is. Press that check mark again. So we no longer get a record, but we now have a list of values. So when I click off to the side now, I can see that we just have the value parts of that line, and the same for the next row and so on. So I can remove all the other columns. I no longer need them. And for that, I'll drill down into this custom column. So this time I'll choose drill down. And that gets me a list containing multiple nested lists. So the next step is we'll have to do some work in the advanced editor window. So I'll open that. And I'll zoom in a bit. Of course, I'm going to add a new variable, so I have to place a comma at the end of the last line. I'll press enter. Let's call this to table. Right. Now, my data is still spread across rows. We have dates, then we have values, dates, values, and so on. That pattern is repeated throughout. So I want to extract all of the lists that contain dates. For that, I can use a function called list alternate. Okay, there it is. It wants a list. That's our custom step. So I'm just going to copy that name. That's this output that we're seeing on our screen. So I'll enter that here. Then it wants a count. So the number of values that are skipped each time. I want to skip just one item. So I'll enter a 1 here. Then a repeat interval. So that's the amount of items to keep in between the skipped items. That's going to be a 1 as well. And the final one is an offset. So where in the list do you want to begin? I want to begin at the top of my list. So I'll enter a 1 as well. And let's just see what this returns. So I'll copy that and paste that after the in clause so we can return the output of that. Press done. And on the face of it, nothing changed. I still have a list with lists. Let's press off to the side in the white space so we can see the contents of those lists. So first, my first list contains dates, and so does my second list. Perfect. Now, if I want to extract the numerical values, then I have to skip one to begin with. So I can omit this, press that check mark again, and now I'm getting the numerical values. All right. Of course, I have a list of lists, and I want to extract the values that are in these lists as well. So in the formula bar, I'll add list combine. Let's press that check mark, and that now returns all of the values. So we found a way to extract both type of values, and we can also now, of course, we need to stitch these two lists together to form a table again. So I'll open the advanced editor window. I'll zoom in a bit. And let's create a table. I'll use a table from columns. Yep. Table columns, there it is. Got this. All right. It's a list containing lists. So here I can paste in the list that we just created, the one that we're still seeing on the screen. And let's also paste in the other one, right? So I want to start with the one with dates. So I need to add that starting position again to retrieve the dates. So this one will retrieve the dates, and this one retrieves the values that you still see here on the screen. I can also pass in the column names in this function. So as a list, my first column will be date, and my second column, that will be number of employees. All right, let's press done. Great. So final steps of the process again, cleaning up some of the blanks here, remove those. Again, set appropriate data types. I'll choose datetime. Sorry. Yep, that's fine. And a whole number. Extract the date. Awesome. So 3 very different approaches to just a single a single problem and let me know which one you like best.
I've got a question for you, Melissa. Have you
Yeah.
tested the performance of all three of those to see which one actually runs faster?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that in just a minute.
Fantastic. I don't see any other comments in it. You know, just again, shock and awe. That's the pretty much the big flow through on this. Yeah, so
Shock and awe. I'm wondering if yeah, okay. Let's hope it got the message across at least.
no, I think it did. The big component on this, I mean, is that, you know, you obviously got a really clear command of what you're doing with this stuff, and it's very obvious, right? And that's the part that it's amazing to watch someone who is really good at this stuff actually just sort of, you know, wander through it like it's no big deal, which you're doing. And I mean, I'm admiring it. It is mind blowing, as Alex Powers says. So there you go. Very cool stuff.
That's the stuff you can do with Power Query, right? Mind-blowing stuff. Yeah. Yeah, awesome. I don't know if we're going to share this file afterwards, so I'll just rename this. I'm sure you folks might want to dig in. So I'll close and load 2. Only create a reference. There we go. And especially for CAN, I've used Monkey Tools to extract, to look at the performance at least for these queries. So what I did was I duplicated my initial table with the sample data 1,000 times, then did 5 trials on that. And the first thing we see here is the solution that was created by the UI. It's pretty decent, I think. The second one is almost twice as fast. That was the hybrid solution. And you can still cut off about 15% or so with the final one, with the custom solution that we did in the end. So yeah, that's
very cool.
That's really amazing stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just waiting for comments. I think you've stunned some people with this stuff. So that is very cool stuff. I'm actually curious. I'm looking at the chart on this one, and I know this is something that I want to use. I want to look at with Monkey Tools, because there's one concern that I have on this is the first run. I'm wondering if it's actually causing that privacy off in the solution. I'm surprised that in the UI-driven solution, that with privacy off, it would actually be taking longer to refresh than with privacy on. That seems very strange. Normally, when privacy is on, it actually impacts these things in a negative way, and we can see that that's true in all these cases. But it looks like, I mean, with multiple runs there, it's consistently coming back where the privacy on was actually faster. That's really weird.
It is. Yeah, I have no explanation for that. No.
Yeah, I'll need to get that workbbook from you, Melissa. And I know actually Ron had actually asked as well whether or not we'd be able to share the solution file. I'd be curious to actually get that and run some more tests on that, because that is definitely an odd one here. But yeah, very cool stuff. And it is interesting to see where the custom solution does come in much faster, because I know that that's actually not always the case when you reach into custom coding. Sometimes the UI can be faster, and I've got examples of that. But yeah. But this is definitely more performant, no question. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, the UI, I find the UI performs very decent. At least in my experience. Yeah, you have to try to cut off redundancy in your code, right? So try to avoid duplicating steps and those kind of best practices. But I think, yeah, overall it really does generate decent code. The most stunned I was the difference between the UI-driven solution and the hybrid solution, because to me they don't seem that far apart, but performance-wise, it's pretty massive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brian is asking if you know what aspects of the UI-driven solution might actually be in place that are causing the slower execution. Any idea?
Well, we did the pivot and the unpivot, but yeah, no.
I think there was an
I haven't
index
looked at
column that got added in there
Yeah,
somewhere as well, right? So that would buffer things at that point in time, which could potentially, depending on where it's done, could have an impact on it. But you'd have to tear it apart, and it's the challenge with all this stuff with performance testing, as Melissa can tell you, is that with the M engine being a lazy evaluation, just the way that you order your steps on can change the way it executes, which is hard to try and predict. But yeah. Anyhow, other questions here. Gary's got a question. I mean, just sort of to the floor, I guess, on is if anybody else is using your shortcut to calling functions and in custom columns, just typing the capitalized letters to call functions. I'm not clear on exactly what that means. Maybe Gary can clarify on that one a little bit.
Yeah. Well, to get back to you on the index column, that second solution that also has the index column. So it's yeah, I'm not sure it has to do with that. But yeah, that of course it always creates a unique value for each row, right? So that's always a nice effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was interested to see, Melissa, just as a comment, sort of globally on this while we're waiting for other questions to come in. The drill down in your hybrid solution in order to actually go and build that custom function was interesting, and I wish that you could actually go and turn something like that into a function right in place like that. Except that it needs a table passed into it. And of course, Power Query won't allow us to set up a table to be passed in properly using a parameter, which is really frustrating because it would be so nice, I think, for users to be able to build those kind of custom functions through the user interface rather than have to go back into cutting and pasting in the advanced editor and whatnot. So yeah, it's a tricky piece there. It should be nice if they would actually make some changes in that regard.
I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
Henry's saying the user interface needs to search and find the employ as an extra step. I personally don't think that's going to be a huge impact on that. It's just a filter, really. Well, I guess it's an if statement, so if statements can be expensive, but I don't know there'd be a huge. Yeah, it'd be tough to sort that out.
Yeah, also in the number of steps, right? It's not that huge of a difference.
Yeah. Josh is asking, he says, awesome to see the three approaches. As a novice user that sees several novel and moderately sized data sets, less than 100,000 rows each day, which approach would you recommend for quickly transforming the data set? All right, so novice user, which approach would you recommend?
The UI, definitely. Yeah, always start with the UI, get your head around it, and then start making modifications. It's
yeah.
Unless you hit a wall and you need to do something on performance, just get comfortable getting to know the UI. There's no shame in that. Absolutely not.
It's funny, Alex Powers and I were having a conversation back and forth as you were presenting just on the fact that, I mean, I love more steps in the user interface, but I always joke that the reason being is because one of my favorite things to do is to delegate work and maintenance to somebody else. And the more slick the solution is, the harder it is to do that because it ups the skill level of what somebody needs to do it. If it's all coded through the UI, boom, you can throw it off to somebody else. So Josh, my advice would be do it the easy way first. And as Melissa says, if you hit a performance impact, that's when you go back and go, okay, now let's figure out how can we make this faster and whatnot. So yeah, and just as Christian says, click any button that you can, and you can't break anything. If it blows up, just click the X and make the step go away. It's not like you can format a server doing this. Not that I've ever done that in the past by accident. All right, Ron's got a question. When you're typing a function, the list shows highlighted letters in each of the parts of the command. If you type just those 2 or 3 letters, the editor will display a short list of matching commands. I guess that's a comment. Okay.
Yeah, that's a technique I usually use. Yeah.
Cool. I don't honestly see any other questions that are coming in, Melissa. So I'm not sure if you've got more to show or.
No, I kind of flew through this one. That's what you get, I suppose. On your third webinar, right? You just
That's all good.
go full out.
That's
Yeah.
so good. We do have one question. What are the top things to check for to improve performance?
That's a difficult one because it depends on how you use the user interface as well. Try to avoid reordering columns, that kind of stuff. No, I mean, yeah, that's a difficult one to just answer because there are types of transformations, of course, that that can have a real impact. But yeah, I don't know if you have anything to offer on this, Ken.
Yeah, some of the ones that I would say is transposing data. It can be very expensive depending on how many columns you are moving from or creating. Unpivoting is usually pretty quick. That's not too much of an issue. Merging tables, depending on how you do it, can have some very, very serious performance impacts. So, I mean, again, it depends, right? And it depends on what your data sources that you're using as well. If you're trying to do things against a text file versus against a SQL Server, you might find that the same steps in SQL Server work much, much faster, only because query folding is taking place behind the scenes, where you're doing it inside a a text file. You don't have that engine to take care of things. So this is the challenge. And I mean, I know that when we talked to Imke Feldman, I mean, she'll tell you that performance tuning in Power Query is as much art as it is science. I mean, it's one of those things. And again, because the lazy evaluation engine can change what actually happens depending on even sometimes the order of the stats. So, okay. Now Christian's going to bust out the tough questions for you, Melissa. So, how often have you really needed something like list.accumulate or list.generate in the real world?
In the real world, in my own work, never. That's the beauty of it. I'm in full control. No, but I've had to use that on a couple of forum questions. So yeah, but not often. I try to avoid it as much as I can, by the way. But yeah, they're cool.
Is there a reason? Is there a reason why you try to avoid it?
I try to avoid it because of performance, because I know it can have some performance impact.
Okay.
But usually buffering things that go in them helps a lot. Yeah. And
Fair
like
enough.
I said, I haven't had the need to use them in my own work. So
there you go. All right. Melinda's asking, can you explain again why not use the change data type to date in order to remove the time or from the time and date?
Yep. Just let me see. We'll duplicate this one. So here was that change to type step. Let's see if that works here, and it gets an error because it is a datetime. At least apparently it does matter what you select here. So when I select a datetime value first, then it's absolutely fine.
For a reference, Melissa, I'll tell you what I usually do with these ones if I've got times on it. I know you would go to transform and extract the date at this point. What I do usually is I just go now and set this as a date and just add a new step. And I find that actually works relatively easily, and it saves me having to change to a different tab because I'm that lazy. I mean, efficient. So
that's a fair point.
So yeah, that's a common one with date times. If there's a timestamp that's on it and you try to go directly to a date, it will throw an error, and that's why I'll go do that date time and then date separately. So there you go, Melinda. That's the answer to that one. So and honestly, if it is just a date and you convert it to a date time and then convert it back to a date, it will always work. So it's just safer to do it that way, in my opinion, if you're looking to avoid problems. So
yeah.
And I see in the chat right now that Ron's advertising for you. If you want to see more, Melissa, she's got a part 2 session of at Excel DNA called Practical Power Query Solutions. There you go. Awesome. See, this is good. So
Thank you, Ron.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, the only other comment I'm seeing in here is that obviously your presentation was clear enough, so there's no question. So well done.
Well, that's always nice. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Listen, I really appreciate you coming and doing this, Melissa. I mean, this is fantastic, and I mean, you know, I work with Power Query all day, every day, almost. It feels like I learned some new stuff in this as well. It's always amazing to see a master of their craft come in and do things that you hadn't seen before as well. Really cool, and I'm really pleased that we had you here. So. To do this stuff. Oh, Christian's throwing out new articles. Have you had the chance to explore the new catchword in the in error handling for Power Query yet?
I found that article today as well, so I'm looking forward to getting some work done and catching errors.
I heard that
trying for them.
Yeah, I heard the disappointing thing is that it's only in Power BI desktop right now, is what I've been told, which is a shame because you know, my world's more Excel focused, but I can't wait until we have that in Excel that we can use it there too. So
I'm sure that's just the next iteration. I'm sure you're on Office 365, right? So
of course, I'm on the Insider channel. Of course I am.
Right.
So now
You'll
I just
be
got to
there in
check
no
if my last
time.
update has it. Yeah, exactly. There you go. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming and doing this, Melissa. And I hope that we can have you come back in future and share more tips with the crew here. I think everybody's obviously enjoyed this and appreciated it. And at this point, I guess if we can get a copy, if you can send me a copy of the workbook for it. I know Ron for sure would like to have a look at it, and I'd certainly like to take a look at a couple of pieces inside here as well, and test some of that performance stuff again with Monkey Tools. That'd be fantastic. Yeah, been fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Love to hear your findings on that as well. Yeah, I'll send it to you right after, so that's no problem.
Awesome, sounds great. All right, well. Yeah, thanks again for coming. Thanks everyone for attending and being part of this. And we will get the video recording up in the next 48 hours and posted to the Skillwave YouTube channel. And until then, the RSVPs should be open for the next session for Layla's session on Charticulator. So don't forget to sign up for that. And we'll see you all next time.